Okay, cool.
All right, so cool. So hi, thank you so much for doing this. I guess let's start out by like saying your name and where you're from and like where you invest. Yeah, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, awesome. Hi, Megan. Thank you for having me. My name is Belen Caballero, and I am originally from Mexico, then originally from California, and then currently in Oklahoma. But I am recording from Illinois, so I'm just all over the place. Um, so my husband and I, invest in both California, Southern California, as well as Oklahoma, a little north of Oklahoma City, and we've been investing for about 2.5 years.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Cool.
Yeah,
So yeah, I guess why on earth did you start investing in real estate?
awesome. So it's actually my husband who got me into real estate investing. When I first met him 3 and something years ago, he was like, "Hey, what do you think about real estate investing?" And I was actually really close-minded because, again, I did come from Mexico, and as a Mexican, all you really hear is like, "Get a W-2 job, get a retirement, and then just work the rest of your life." So that was like the American dream, right? And so when I met my husband, he's like, "Oh, well, there's this other thing you could do called real estate investing, and you can be your own boss, and like you can like make a lot of money." And I was like, "You're crazy." Um, but I listened to him, and every time we would go on a trip or something, he would put on a podcast. He would put on an audiobook, and I was just kind of like listening as we were going. And it wasn't until like a year later that I became really invested. During that time, during that year, my husband had bought a triplex in California, and I actually moved into one of the houses, and I was helping him rehab that particular house. And then we moved to San Jose because of his job. And that's when he's like, "Oh, well, maybe we should invest out of state." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, it's cheaper. Let's do it. Why not?" So all of my paychecks were going into this property out of state in Oklahoma. Um, Lots of lessons learned during that property. I won't get into that. Uh, but I just became more invested. And then we moved back to Southern California when I actually got a part time job, and I was doing part time, like a W-2, and then part time real estate investing. And I was working on our rehabs in Southern California, as well as managing our projects out of state. And then February of this year, I was like, "You know what? I'm going full time." So I moved to Oklahoma and working on
Woo!
one of our, I
Congrats.
know,
Yeah.
working in one of our flips. And so me and my dad actually partnered up, and we're rehabbing our current flip, and then managing other projects that are kind of starting to pop up. So we're under contract for another property, and then looking to see who's going to be rehabbing that one. So
Cool.
yeah.
That's awesome. That's super exciting. One thing I will say though, I know you said you don't want to talk about it, but I love talking about like the things you learned along the way. I think it's so important for people that are just starting out because like there's a ton of mistakes I made and I've, been doing this since 2014 now. So like I don't remember all of the mistakes I made. So like if you remember your mistakes, please share.
Yeah, I mean, we honestly, I feel like we're still making mistakes and we're still learning. But when we first started, the first mistake was that we moved away from the triplex in Southern California without it being finished. So we had one vacant house unfinished that we couldn't rent it out because it was like the kitchen wasn't done. There was a bathroom that didn't even have a bathroom, it was just an empty room. And we had just left it like that. And we're like, "Oh, well, we're just moving to San Jose because of my husband's job." First mistake, I wish we would have just had him transfer so that we could have finished that, so that we could have started getting our cash flow then. Because now we're getting a pretty decent cash flow from the triplex now that it's finished.
Yeah.
So if we would have done that, we wouldn't have been struggling so much to like use up all of our paychecks to do our out of state investing. Then the lessons learned with our first out of state investing property, we had supposedly partnered up with one of my husband's friend, And then he ended up getting some financial issues. So we never saw any money from him, and we didn't account for that. So we accounted for us to only put in 50% of the down payment and 50% of the rehab cost, but it ended up being 100% of everything, which is why all of my paychecks are going into this property. And we were still like in this partnership for like 6 months, even though that person couldn't put in any money. So then it just created a lot of arguments between me and my husband. And I'm like, we need to have him like um quick claim deed the house over to us, because
Yeah.
he's not really investing anything into it. So we never had like a formal contract with this person. Like we didn't have like a partnership contract. We didn't know anything. Like we were so new. Like we didn't know like, oh yeah, you should have a contract so that people actually, like pay their part. You should have a joint bank account so that like, the money is in there, and like that it's in there and that's the money that you're using. These are things that we learned after the fact. And then finally, yeah, like he ended up quick claiming the deed over to us, and like it worked out fine.
Yeah.
But then also like the contractor we had at the time, we were paying him hourly. So don't ever pay a contractor hourly. The project was just supposed to be cosmetics. It was supposed to be a super quick flip, and we were gonna rent out the house. It ended up taking 6 months, and it went from like $25,000 of rehab cost to $50,000 of rehab cost. So it like doubled, and the time doubled, and we were just like, we're running out of money. We ended up getting like a loan from our credit card. We were like asking family members for money. Like we were trying to do everything that we could so we wouldn't lose this deal, because it was a good deal. We just weren't prepared for all of the unforeseens. And like somehow, I don't even know how we managed, and now we have a line of credit from that property that we are using to like invest in other properties. So it turned out to be a pretty good deal,
Mhm.
but it was just so much heartache and headaches and stress and gray hairs, and I'm just like, I can't.
No, that's thank you so much for sharing that. That's really
Yeah, of
really
course.
powerful, and it sounds like there were a lot of like turns and y'all just kept going, because like I've been there so many times myself, and like there are times that I'm just like every day I wake up like I'm like I want to throw up because of the stress sometimes, but
Yeah.
then there's sometimes like you in your story you got a HELOC, it sounds like a home equity line of
Hmm.
credit, and that was like huzzah, like it all worked out. But yeah, it takes an enormous amount of grit to like get through it. And like
Yeah, I
daily pep talks to yourself, and like yeah, it's madness sometimes. So
yeah, and
congrats.
nightly cries.
Yeah.
Nightly cries at night.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. Yeah, that's really powerful and beautiful that y'all made it through it. And it sounds like your partnership with your husband is very strong. So that's also great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you're also partners with your partner, so if you know anything about being partners with your significant other, it's like you have to be able to balance it, like you can't just be work work all the time, because then it's like your relationship is suffering. So we've learned to balance our lives where we work, but we also make time for us. So it's like,
Right.
okay,
Yeah.
we're also a relationship, like we need to figure out how to be a relationship.
Oh man. Okay, cool. So thank you for sharing that. Really, really appreciate
Yeah, of
that.
course.
Um, and thank you for sharing like the lessons learned too. So it sounds like the lessons learned were, make sure you have a joint bank account set up. The money is in the account before you start the loan process and all of
Yep.
that. Definitely a contract. If you need help with contracts, there's like what Rocket Lawyer is a good one. It's super fast and free. Not free. I think it's free for 30 days, but you can do like a $1 per month,
Trial.
yeah, thing too. So it's
Oh, I
really
didn't know
cheap.
about that.
Yeah, super cheap. And then, I mean, it's not like the best contract, but it's a great contract because it's a contract. Like, it works. Um,
Yeah.
and then, yeah, so I think those would be like the two top lessons, right? Joint bank account, make sure the money's funded. And then of course the contract, just in case. And you got
Yeah.
super lucky that they did like come to their senses and were like, okay, let me quit claim this. But that could have been really nasty. So
Mhm.
thank you for sharing that, and I'm glad you got through that.
Thank you.
All right, so let's see. Um, yeah, so you did talk about like your first, I think, was that your first deal?
That was our first out of state deal.
First out of state deal. Okay, all
Yeah.
right. Well, yeah, let's talk numbers a little bit. So I know you said the rehab went to 50,000 and it was 6 months. This is the one that's out of state, correct?
Yeah, this is our first out of state deal.
Okay, great. So so how much did y'all purchase that for?
So because we were purchasing out of state in Oklahoma, the prices are a little bit more fair.
Yeah.
We purchased this house for $79,000.
Okay.
And we were looking at the analysis, the comp analysis around the area, and the comparables. And we were like, okay, we could possibly get like 150 out of this house. Like
Mhm.
if we stay to a good budget, like this could be a really good uh rental that we can refinance and get our money back. So we were trying to do like essentially a burr of buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat.
Got it. Nailed it.
So that's what we were trying to do.
Right.
So it would have been such a great deal if we would have stuck to like a $30 budget with labor and materials, which we thought we could. Because honestly, this house, like, it was a pretty big house. It's a 3-2, a 3-bed, 2-bath. It's, I believe, 18 square feet or 1,800 square feet. So it was a decent size. It was like it was just outdated. So we were like,
Mhm.
okay, so we just need to paint it. We just need to like refinish the cabinets, change the flooring because they had like the old school vinyl flooring.
Yeah.
The carpet, they had a carpet in some areas. So we were like super confident going into this project. But again, with all the unforeseens, the project became a nightmare.
Right.
So we ended up paying, like I said, $50,000 in labor plus materials. The holding cost also kind of ate into our profits because we held the property for more than the 3 months that we had set as a timeline.
Mhm.
It ended up being over 6 months. And then when we finally wanted to refinance this property, we would have left money in the deal if we would have refinanced it. Because when you refinance, you're only getting either 75 to 80% of the after repair value. And we were lucky enough to find a bank that said they could do 80%. But even with 80%, we wouldn't have been able to take out all of our money. And like I said, we ended up having to take like a loan on our credit card, as well as had family kind of invest in into our property because we were running out of money. And even with like both of us working full time, both of us making decent money, like all of my paychecks were going into this project. Like it wasn't enough. Like we weren't able to keep up because we were paying the contractor on a weekly basis, and he was putting in like 8 hours a day, charging us $20, $30 an hour. And so it was like it was just depleting all of like whatever we had. So we ended up looking to see what else we could do. And we found that we could get a line of credit on it. So HELOCs, a home equity line of credit, typically is for like a house that you're living in. Because we weren't living in this particular house, we were able to get just like a regular line of credit, or some people call it a home equity loan. For us, it's just called like a line of credit, like that's what the bank calls it. And so we were able to get 80% of that, of whatever the appraisal value came back as. And it was still 80%, which, yes, technically we are still leaving money into this deal, but we're able to reuse this line of credit for up to 7 years. So we've currently used it on 2 different properties. So it was more beneficial for us to do that versus we just cash out the 80% of the after repair value. And then now we're just like, that's it. We still leave money in the deal.
Yeah. Okay, so that's great info. A couple of things I want to run through. So,
Yeah, of course.
what was the bank name for the line of credit that you used?
Yes, it's called Cherokee line of, or Cherokee Bank
Okay,
something.
cool.
It's called
And
Cherokee.
yeah, and so do you know it's fitting for Oklahoma?
Right.
Do you know what your APR, your annual percentage rate is on that currently?
You mean like the interest or?
Yeah. It's
Yeah, so
usually
it's
like prime plus 2 for HELOCs, but I'm just curious what it is right now.
well, for us, they're charging like an interest, like a percentage. It's just 4.5.
4.5. That's
Um,
great. Yeah.
yeah, and we
Okay.
ended up getting $65,000 on it.
Cool. That's awesome. So when you did your appraisal, what did the appraisal come back at?
So it came back to the comparables that we had originally looked at. So it was $147,000 or $147,000,
Oh,
and we
that's better.
had,
Yeah.
yeah, we
Yeah,
had
that's
average
awesome.
150,000. So we were able to pull a lot of money from it. We
Yeah.
just didn't want to leave anything in there,
Right.
and for us to be able to reuse a line of credit, it's like, okay, well, we're gonna get the most out of our money.
Yeah, that's super awesome actually. So in the beginning you said y'all were thinking conservatively. It sounds like 130 based on the comps.
Hmm.
But you got 147. That's awesome. That's a super awesome number. So if I'm sharing this with people as a learning experience, so what a good rule of thumb for this type of deal is 70. So you would take whatever the amount is. So you think it's 130,000. So you take 130,000 and you would times that by 70%, because as you were saying, sometimes banks will do 80%, sometimes they'll do 75%, sometimes they'll do 70. So we as investors like to go conservatively speaking at all times, because as you can see, things come up. So let's say 130,000 times 70. So that's 91,000. So then you subtract what you think your rehab cost would be, which you at the time thought it would be 25,000. So we're at
Right.
91,000 now. We're going to subtract 25,000. So that's 66,000. And you purchased this property for 79,000. That's pretty damn close. Like y'all were kind of like on the thing, but if you thought it was 80%, those are really, really good numbers. So y'all did you
Hmm.
did find an awesome deal. Um, and congrats that the value is 147, because that makes the numbers look a lot better. So if you do 147 minus all of that, you would have been at like pretty much where you bought it at, 77,900. So awesome on your first out of state deal. Y'all killed it. It's also like even though the rehab went from 25,000 to 50,000, like it's still, this deal still makes sense, like because you were able to purchase other properties and you still spun it in a way that makes sense. So like just like me, a lot of times things will come up and it feels like you're not winning or like you're not making it work, and then you just come up with a new thing. You talk to people, it's just like another math problem. And it's like, okay, wait, so what can
Yeah.
I do to like spin this to still be okay? And there's like, I think Brandon Turner always says this on Bigger Pockets, but he's like, it's building your parachute on the way down from like jumping out of a plane. And that's exactly what it is. It's like, okay, let me scramble. Here's the new problem. We're going to make it work. So that's awesome. You figured it out. And that's super cool that you were able to spin that in a way that you're still investing. And congrats to you for sticking with it too, because like, sometimes after a project, I'm like, do I want to do this again? Like,
I know, right? So I'm gonna go through that heartache and headache? No.
yeah. But then, I think the first time I sold a house, I was like, oh, this is why I do it. Okay. This is great. I have money in my bank account. This is great.
Right?
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's awesome.
Yeah, of
That's
course.
super helpful. All right. Let's see. What's your least favorite part of real estate investing?
Oh man, all the unforeseens.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
People are always like, expect the unexpected. I'm like, how are you supposed to do that? Like you're going into a deal like thinking you've calculated everything perfectly, and you're like, you feel like you're prepared. Like, I'll give you an example. I I moved to Oklahoma, and we were looking at this property that we wanted to purchase because it had some fire damage, and it's the current property that we're currently working on. We were like, oh, it's just the kitchen burn. Like, we'll just take away like the drywall in the kitchen and like clean up everything else. It should be fine. There was a bunch of stuff in there as well. The water and the electricity had been cut off because the owner wasn't living there for over a year.
Mhm.
So our realtor was like, "Oh, well, you can't really do a home inspection because there is no water. Like, you can't check the pipes. Like, there is no electricity, and we know that there's some electrical damage because of the fire that happened." He's like, "Oh, but like the everything looks really good," and we love our realtor, and he's never like done us wrong or anything. So he was thinking like it should be fine, right? And we trusted him, of course. Like, we were like, okay, we don't need a home inspection. Okay, fast forward 3 months later, we've replaced an entire HVAC system. We've replaced an entire plumbing system, which that was pricey. We've replaced most of the electrical, more than what we thought we needed to fix. We replaced the entire panel. We ended up like doing some like outside work for the electrical. Like, it just went crazy. And like our $30,000 budget went from 30,000, so now it's 60,000. And like, it still makes sense with a $60,000 rehab budget, but we're just like, what, where did we go wrong? And we were like thinking like, oh, well, we didn't have a home inspection. They would have seen that all the pipes were rusted and broken. They would have seen that the electrical needed more work. They would have seen that the HVAC system was completely like shut. Like, it was an intense experience, and we're still dealing with it because we are still rehabbing the house. We're not finished with it. We've passed all of the unforeseens. Everything else is just putting the house back together. But yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely like the biggest thing that I like. Every day I'm like, why am I doing real estate investing? If there's always something. There's always something that I'm just like, why? But no, like, honestly, it's just those lessons learned. I mean, going back to what we were talking about earlier, and like right now, like, yes, the unforeseens absolutely, like, they're the worst, and I absolutely hate them. Um, but then like feeling reward from like, oh wow, we turned this house from this dump into this. And
Mhm.
like right now the house it has new drywall, new insulation, and it looks like a house. We opened up some walls and like added like this giant engineered beam, and I'm just like, damn, I want to live here.
Yeah, that's funny.
So it's just,
Yeah.
it is rewarding.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that's kind of how I feel sometimes. It's like a piece of artwork or something when you're done sometimes. You're like, I've definitely experienced that too, where I'm like, I kind of want to turn this into an Airbnb so I can like chill there sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's cool. Yeah. So I'm curious, do you remember the numbers on the plumbing? Because you had to replace like it sounds like a lot of pipes. Did you have to do all of
Yeah.
them or like
It
what are we
was mostly all like
how
so
much
the
was that? I'm just curious because I've never personally had to do a ton of plumbing stuff. I buy properties that are like 1940 or newer. And so usually, there's some stuff, but like not usually too bad because they used a lot of copper piping and
yeah.
stuff. But yeah, I'm just curious what that, if you know what that costs, because that's crazy.
Yeah, so it ended up being around $8,000, $8,000.
Okay.
And it was because, so yeah, this house, it's not super old. It's like 1925, 1930, something like that. So it is on the older side. It's got all the copper pipes, or it had all the copper pipes. The problem is though that a lot of the like the drain pipes were rusted and detached from like the actual, like, where like all the water drains into.
Mhm.
So all of the water was just dripping onto the bottom of the house.
Mhm.
And this house has a crawl space underneath. So it's set on
Oh, right.
like the supporting, whatever they're called. So
Yeah.
it's got the dirt, and then the house sits like above it in these like support beams.
Yeah.
And so it like you could tell that the owners knew because they had left bottles of like mold
Oh
control
my God.
Clorox, like just like turned over onto the area where all the drains were broken. And I'm like, so
Whoa.
you knew that your house was smelling moldy because all the water was just
Dang,
running there.
that's
Like,
crazy.
no, yeah, like it was crazy.
Yeah.
And if we would have had the home inspection, he would have gone in there and he would have seen these pipes are broken and we
Yeah.
could have negotiated the price down, but
Right.
we didn't do that. So
Yeah.
always have a home inspection.
Definitely. I mean, yes, definitely. However, I've been risky, so I buy foreclosures right now, and so you can't get home inspections on a lot of foreclosures, and they
Mm,
actually won't even let you like on the property, like it's trespassing. So it's interesting to invest that way. It means that um, I basically follow like a 25% rule. Like I want to buy it for 25% of what I think the value is.
yeah,
Because it's like, anything can happen. So I account for basically tearing it down.
yeah. Well,
'Cause
that's good that you have that in your numbers, you
yeah.
know?
Yeah. Because like who knows what's gonna happen. But
Yeah,
yeah, but that's 8,000 is actually not as bad as I would expected. So that's good for me to know because Oklahoma is very similar to Arkansas pricing. So
yeah,
thanks. I appreciate that little tip.
of course.
All right, let's see. So what's your favorite part of real estate investing?
Just seeing the after project, like the house being finished and people actually liking how it looks. Like we just finished not that long ago in January, we finished one of our units in California and we were listing it because we are our own property managers in California, but we have an out-of-state property manager in Oklahoma. So
Mhm.
in California, we were listing the unit, and we were like, yeah, put up some nice pictures, like the after pictures, and it looks completely different than how it did, right?
Yeah.
And then all these people are like, yeah, I do want to like rent your house, like, oh, can you send me more videos? Or like, oh, it's so nice and it's so cute, and like you don't see a lot of these homes like that in that area. And I'm like, oh, that feels really good. Like they
Aw.
actually like how it looks. And so like our tenant now, it's a young couple and they're like engaged and stuff. And so they're like, it's like a freshly new home for them and they're like super excited. I met them in person like a month ago,
Mhm.
and the guy, he was like, oh yeah, like we just love it here so much, like it's so sweet, like it's so cute, and like like we just love the floors and the walls and this and that, and I'm like,
Aw.
oh.
Oh,
So
that's
that
awesome.
part like makes me feel really good because I know that we don't try to like just put, like people say like just put lipstick on a pig or whatever, right? Like we don't try to do that, and that's the reason that we ended up replacing everything in the current flip that we're doing, because we know that like if we were to buy a house that we find out later has a lot of like underlining issues,
Mhm.
we'd be really pissed. So we're like, no, if we're gonna do something, we're gonna do it right. And sometimes my husband, he's a perfectionist. Sometimes it'll be like, oh, this paint smeared into something else or whatever, and I'm just like, oh, just leave it. It's fine. No one's gonna know. And he's like, no, I'm gonna know. Like, let's do it right. I'm just like, okay. So, like,
Oh,
we'll go back and, like, fix it, and, like, I don't mind because it just looks so much better, and, like, in your heart that you did a really good job, and that house is gonna be, like, beautiful for, like, the next 10 years or whatever.
right.
So, I think that's the best part.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Aw.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so what's the weirdest thing you found in a property? That like for me, it's like all kinds of weird stuff, but I'm just curious if you have something that you've thought of that was just like, why did this happen here?
Which property do I start with?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do 2 properties.
Okay.
One of them, it's one of the units in California. There was a bunch of couches in the garage that had leftover drug utensils. I wouldn't know what to call them. The garage door had the lock. Um, backwards. So the lock was for you to lock it from the garage to
Right.
keep people from the, yeah, to keep people from the house
Yeah.
to not go into the garage. There was a ton of cockroaches all over the kitchen. And they had a little girl, which this is the sad part. Because when we pulled out that carpet, there was pee stains all over that carpet.
Hey,
So you could tell they were already doing drugs in there. They weren't taking care of the kid.
man.
So then we felt really bad for the little girl. But that was just like gross, dirty, they were doing drugs in their situation. Now, the flip that we're currently working on, I don't know why. I guess I'm just like, we buy houses with people who do drugs or something. I don't know. But the house that burnt down, we ended up clearing it out of a bunch of stuff. There was pots, like empty dirt pots, where you could tell they were growing marijuana in. When we pulled those pots out, mice came out of those things. It was disgusting. Like so many mice just like
What?
crawling out of these giant pots. It was like giant pots of dirt. And
Why would
I'm
mice
guessing
be in there? That's crazy. I've never heard of
I'm
that.
I don't know. I don't know if they're the ones that ate the marijuana plants. I
That's
don't know
insane.
if like
I've
because that
never heard of that in my life.
I
That's
don't
crazy.
know. There was just a bunch of mice and there was like tons and tons and tons of these giant pots and they were all empty, like there was no marijuana. But yeah, like it was just disgusting and I'm like, man, I wonder if that's why it burnt down. Like maybe there were, or
Yeah.
not burnt down, but like there was a fire because something went wrong when they were cooking something up.
Yeah. Wow.
I don't know,
That's
but
intense.
it's
I've
all,
never heard
yeah,
of mice living in like dirt pots. I
I don't
mean, I know rats, and mice will make like little things in the walls sometimes with like newspaper and stuff. But dirt is just, I guess, I don't know. Yeah.
I
I
don't
guess you
know, but
just
there
like
was
burrow a little hole in there. That's wild.
yeah, there was a lot of like shredded paper inside of these pots. So I don't know if
Oh,
they
then
like
that's
brought
it.
all the papers in there or like
Yeah.
that's what they were using to like grow the marijuana. I don't know, but it was
Yeah.
crazy.
Okay, so they made little homes in there. That's so interesting. I've never heard of that. All right. Okay, let's see. What's the first real estate acronym you came across and you're like, what is that?
Oh my goodness. I have been so dumb in front of people sometimes. Like I I do a lot of research in order to understand acronyms. So English is my second language. And people say acronyms and it doesn't click. And I'm like, what did you just say? Like, what was that letter you just used? And I'm over here like Googling it, like, what does it mean? The one that I had the hardest time with was after repair value,
Hmm.
ARV.
For people interested in buying houses for profit, the buzzword is ARV, the after repaired value. And what they mean is, what is the house worth in fixed up condition? Not just fixed up, flat out perfect, or at least the appearances of perfect. Investor grade properties being promoted by wholesalers and others have the asking price and the ARV that reads ARV of ask $60,000, ARV $180,000. Sometimes they will throw in some comp addresses to prove their point. They are just the square footage addresses and the prices, nothing more. 123 Elm Street, 322, 2,200 square feet, $175,000. 425 Main Street, 423, 180,000 square feet, $185,000. It's 1,800 feet, and that is how they come up with an ARV of 180,000. Their method is pretty simple. They take these and other closed sales and guesstimate what yours is by laying it next to these good comps.
Because people would be like, oh yeah, like what's your ARV? And I'm just like, trying to like Google it, like, what is an ARV? What are you talking about? And then finally I was like, oh, after repair value. But then my non so English speaking person, I'm over here like AVR. And then they're like, what? It just made me feel like I didn't know what I was talking about. Like I knew that I meant to say, the after repair value, but because people talk in acronyms, I'm just like, okay, I have to use them too. But it's harder for me to like remember the letter like where it goes and like what it
Yeah.
actually means. So that one's one that I like, it took me longer to like remember, like, okay, A or B, after repair value. Got it.
Oh,
So
well, congrats to you. I mean, you know 2 languages. That's fucking dope. That's
well,
awesome.
thank you. It's not so cool when you are struggling to either speak English or struggling to speak Spanish, because now I can't even speak either language.
You're doing great. You're speaking English.
I don't know how.
Anyway, all right. So people are silly with acronyms sometimes anyway. It's like if you know the concept, like it's fine.
Right. If you
Just
know
say
what
the
you're
whole
doing.
word. Who cares? Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. So, let's say I think you've pretty much covered like the difficult time in your investment journey, unless you want to share some more on that.
Well, I know that it's some, because I know you sent me the questions ahead of time. I just kind of want to talk a little bit about being a female in, like the investing world.
Yeah.
And I don't know if any other woman has had this issue, but um, talking to a subcontractor or a contractor as a woman has been hard for me because I don't feel like they take me seriously. When I took over managing our out-of-state properties, managing the rehab project, the general contractor would always be like, "Oh, where's your husband?" I'm like, "Well, you're talking to me.
Mhm.
Like, you're not talking to my husband, you're talking to me." And it took a while for him to be like, "Okay, she's the person in charge, right? Like, she's the one that's gonna be writing my checks or like paying me or whatever." Another one was that the subcontractors would be outrageous with their prices. Like they, for example, I just needed like some outlets change and like some switches rewired or whatever. And I call this guy and he's an electrician, licensed and everything. I'm like, hey, I found you on Yelp. Can you come over for an estimate to this property, blah, 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 blah. He goes over there, then he calls me back. He's like, well, it looks like some people were doing some stuff they shouldn't have done. So I'm going to have to rewire the entire house and I'm going to charge you $8,000. I'm like, hold up. The electricity works, doesn't it? Yes. Okay. Like nothing had like burned up, like it was fine. Like it was working. The wiring that I needed him to go fix, yes, we knew that that was messed up. And so um I was just like, are you, like, in my head I was like, are you giving me this outrageous price because I'm a woman and you don't think that I do my research, and you were just telling me that you need to rewire the entire house, but like you really don't, and you're just gonna charge me all this money? Like that's kind of shady. And so I was like, oh, this is where I was like, I'll let my husband know what you said. I'll call you back. So every time I want to get out of like a quote or like an estimate, I just say like, "Oh, I'll let my husband know. Like I'll get back to you."
Mhm.
Because I don't want to be like the mean one and be like, "No, that's an outrageous number. Like, thank
Right.
you." So I do use him, but I'm like the one that's always like, like we talk about it and like we decide, and I'm the one that's like, well, yes or no or whatever. But I think that's been like the hardest thing. It's like as a woman, the industry of like contractors and subcontractors, it's mostly male, and I haven't came across a female subcontractor, and so like it's just always having that like the male is like, well, you're the one that's here. You're the one that's, gonna like walk me through the house or whatever. And I have gotten some people now that I am in Oklahoma and they see me in person and they see like how I am and stuff, they'll look at me and they're like, is this your house? Are you flipping this house? Like you like, like they're questioning it. And I'm like,
Mhm.
yes, this is my house, but I am also flipping it, like is that a problem? Like you don't see
Yeah.
women that are investors?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I've asked that question so many times, and usually the response is like, "Oh, I haven't seen any difference." And I'm like, "Really?" But then when I share like an example of mine, the person will be like, "Oh, actually, yeah, I have had something like that happen." And I'm like, "Okay, so like
Yes.
it's a real thing, and like we need to be talking about it because
Yes.
same thing for me. Okay, my first deal was a duplex, and I had to do a whole new HVAC system, electrical wiring, like everything on my first deal. And, it was just me. dealing with this. And like, I mean, I got astronomical pricing. Like it was just like blew my mind, you know, like, and I didn't know because it was my first time. So I'm like, okay, sure, whatever. Had a horrible experience with these contractors. And like it was awful. It took me like a whole year before I could go into Home Depot again because I didn't want to see contractors ever again. Like it was that bad. Or Lowe's, any of them. I was like, fuck
Oh
contractors.
man.
But yeah, so I guess what I learned though is that like I needed to know more of the lingo and I needed to get 3 bids always and compare. So it did like set me up for success later. But to your point, like same thing. Like I just had a guy the other day. I called in Memphis about a deal at apartments, you know, and it's like a $1.3 million, you know, project or whatever. And because I'm a woman, like I know this is why. He was like, you know, like, oh, well, you know, do you know what an escrow is or blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, I have managed $145 million in a portfolio. Like why is it, you know, he doesn't know anything about me because it's a cold call, you know, like just because my voice is, you know, a woman's voice, like, fuck you. Like, I'm sorry that I'm using that language, but like I've run against it so often. And it's the same thing with contractors. Now, like, it's been a little better now that I know a little bit more, but yeah, I had lots of people. One time I had a plumber come out and it's when I knew I needed to get 3 bids for every job. I had a plumber come out and he's like, same thing. It was like $8,000 he wanted to dig up the front of my yard and remove the pipes and place them over here because they were in a wrong location. And then I called, you know, other people. It ended up being a $400 thing. It was just like a little fix at the meter. And the guy that ended up fixing it, he was like, your pipes are copper. I think they just wanted your copper pipes. Like, like it's fucking crazy out there.
Yeah, I didn't know copper pipes even like were worth anything.
They are.
Until later on.
Yeah, people will like straight up just go and steal that from vacant houses. Like it's very like primo stuff.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, so it's just like it's something that I continue to deal with day to day. And I'm not saying it's not getting better, but it's definitely something that is always in the back of my mind. And just like you, like it kind of sucks that you have to say your husband, you know, I mean, at least I'm like kind of masculine presenting, so I can get away with some stuff, but like, it sucks that we have to do that. So if there are contractors out there, please be nice to the women, and don't try to gouge us.
Seriously, no. And don't even get me started with like Lowe's and Home Depot. I actually really like the Lowe's in Oklahoma that I go to because they're really sweet and I've gotten to know a lot of the people there. But in like other Lowe's or Home Depot that I've been to, it's always like a guy coming up to me and like, do you need help with something? And I'm like, no, I'm a strong, independent woman. I know what I'm here for. I know what I need. And then I turn around and I'm like, actually, can you help me with this? But it's just like the fact that a male comes up to me and they're like, do you need help? I'm like, no. Nothing against male. Like, you know, I have a husband, you know, like it's just like feeling not so empowered in that moment where it's like, I know that you're being nice, but like just the gesture of you coming up to me and like asking me if I need help, it's just because I'm a woman. Like there's a guy right here looking at other stuff, like he looks pretty lost too, but you don't go up to him, you don't ask him if he needs help.
Yeah, that's funny.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. I love it because it's, you know, it's something that people don't normally talk about. And I actually got really excited because my last contractor is a woman and the company is owned by her and her mom and her partner, her, you know, her wife. So I was like, dope, this is great. Like, I'm loving this, like super cool. It's a family of color too. So I was like, yes, yes, yes. But then they ended up, I mean, good for them. They're doing their own projects now. So good for them. But I'm like, no, I lost like the best contractors ever.
Oh man. We
Anyway,
need
yeah.
more of those.
Yeah. And their story is kind of similar to like what I'm going through. Is like they kept having so much trouble with contractors. They were like, why don't we just be contractors? Like,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what I'm moving to Arkansas to do some projects because I'm like, okay, well, it's not that difficult to paint a house. Like, I'll just paint the house, damn it. Anyway,
Yeah, seriously.
yeah. All right. Let's see. How have you dealt with COVID challenges while actively investing? Everything's delayed for me. Like a sink takes a week to be delivered, and contractors are backed up. I don't know. Have you experienced similar stuff?
Yeah, I mean, we've had some pros and some cons with COVID. Our real estate investing career or portfolio didn't take off until like end of 2020, or like middle end of 2020, and that's when we started acquiring more properties, and then I became, full time. But then we've also had issues with finding labor because people are getting unemployment, which we were talking about earlier. Like it's just so hard to find labor right now because people are just like, I don't have to work because if I work, I'm gonna make less than if I were to just get unemployment.
Mhm.
So that's been something that's really affected us. The second is just the prices on lumber. I don't why, like, how does that even correlate with COVID? But somehow it does, and they've gone up, and it's been crazy, and I'm just, like, spending so much more money on, like, 2 by 4s and, like, plywood, and even drywall apparently is going up too, and I'm just like, how can we even make this a good deal if I'm spending most of my money on like the materials?
Mhm.
And then yeah, delays too. Like we've experienced a lot of that. I had to replace all the windows in the current flip we're in right now. And they were like, oh yeah, we'll have it to you in a month. And I'm like, okay, yeah, it's reasonable, it makes sense. I call them up like when they were supposed to be there, and then they're like, oh, we haven't even started them. I'm like, oh, you should have told me.
Yeah.
Like this isn't, like this isn't, it's not fair to us because we have a timeline. Like we got this property under a hard money loan. Like we have to pay
Mhm.
that back. We have to be able to meet our like 5 month deadline, but we can't do that if we don't have windows. Like of course, like we're doing other stuff to the house right now in the meantime, but these windows were supposed to get here like 2 weeks ago. They're still not here. Then they tell me that they're going to be here on the 17th. I believe that's this coming Monday.
Mhm.
So I called him up yesterday and I'm like, hey, so are the windows on the way? Like, are they going to get there on Monday? And they're
Yep.
like, actually, I don't know. I'm going to call tomorrow. And my phone was actually just ringing from them earlier as we were speaking. So I'm hoping that they have some good news for me.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yes.
If not, I'm going to pull my hair out.
My toes
I'm
are
going to,
crossed too.
can you do that?
Yes. I had to really like
Cross your arm,
squeeze. Like,
cross the arms, everything. No, seriously, like the delays have been crazy. The finding the labor has been crazy. Meaning I can't find people that want to work. As well as like some of the prices on some of these materials. Oh, and then plumbing material too. The prices for that has gone up. And I talked to the plumber that's been helping us. I asked him like, well, why are these, like uh PEX piping or whatever, it's like crazy expensive right now. And I'm like, why? Like it went from like $1.98 to like over $20 whatever footage that they like sell it for, like whatever bulkage.
yeah.
And I'm like, why is that? Like why? And then he's like, oh, it's because plumbers can't find people to help them with like the work or whatever. So then the people selling like the plumbing material now have increased their prices because they want to keep people from wanting to do any plumbing work because they can't find labor. And I'm like, that doesn't even make sense.
What?
That was the explanation that was given to me. And I was like,
Wow.
okay, yeah. So I
Wow.
don't know.
Yeah, so for me, for example, on this last project I'm working on, or this, current one, appliances, usually I have like my go-to store, and I call them up, like you can usually get it delivered, like pick it out, delivered within the same week. Call them up and they're like, oh, we only have like this model, and this model. Like the choices are like, basically you have to pay 3 times what you used to pay. And so I'm like,
Yeah.
holy shit. So I'm like, okay, well, I can't use y'all. Like, I got to figure this out. So I'm like looking up stuff online. I find like different manufacturers and stuff. And like, okay, like I find a good price. I'm like, okay, let me order it. So I ordered all my appliances, stainless steel, nice, yada, yada. And then every single one of them, it's an oven, a cooktop, because it's a split, refrigerator, the vent hood, all this stuff. Every single item that I ordered, it's like they call me and they're like, oh, it's gonna be this date, or it'll be 2 months from now. And I'm like, what do you mean, or it'll be 2 months from now?
That's
And
a
they're like,
huge difference.
they're like, everything's, it's been chaos. Like, and then like the last one was finally gonna arrive. It's like the dishwasher. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. It's gonna be there in a week, like no big deal. And then, they're supposed to do like 24-hour notice, like give me a call and tell me like a window time frame. And the call didn't happen. So I called them and they're like, oh, that person didn't show up today. So like, it'll be a month from now. And I'm like, what? What do you mean that person didn't show up today? Like the delivery truck driver, and now it's going to be like a month. I'm like, this makes no sense.
Don't they have deliveries like every week?
Yeah, it's been,
Oh,
so I
man.
guess my advice is during COVID, make sure I feel like we're kind of coming, people are getting vaccinated. So it's like, hopefully, slowing down, but like order your appliances really far in advance.
Yeah, you're under contract, order your appliances.
Yeah, exactly. I know. That's exactly what I'm doing now. I'm like, well, give me the
Yeah.
measurements right now. Let's do this. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's actually not a bad
Seriously.
idea. Like in my contingencies when I'm buying a house, like, okay, tell me the measurements of all the appliances.
Yeah,
Yeah,
seriously.
that's funny.
Because you can always like cancel an order,
Yeah,
like it's
that's a great idea. That's a great idea. I'm gonna use that. All right, let's see. Yeah, please. I know you talked about being a woman, but like being a person of color as well. Like, have you experienced issues in that realm?
Not so much. And I think it's because I am light skinned, as a Mexican. Um, I have been very fortunate in that sense, I guess, because I haven't experienced a lot of like discrimination because of my color.
Mhm.
It isn't until like I start talking and then if like they ask me like, where are you from? And I'm like, oh, I'm from Mexico. Then I see a little difference where it's like, oh, she's from Mexico, like I don't know. So there's some times where I have seen that, but it hasn't been as much.
Mhm.
Um, it just goes back to just mostly me being a woman.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for
Yeah,
sharing that. Yeah, I appreciate you
of
sharing that.
course, of
Yeah.
course.
All right. What would you say to an aspiring real estate investor just starting out?
Don't do it. I'm just kidding. No. Honestly, I'm gonna be very cliche and I'm gonna say the thing that I hate people saying, expect the unexpected.
That's funny. Yeah.
No, being prepared for sure. I've learned that, just have a description of the things that you need to do, have like a checklist, have like a floor plan, and then, drawn out like what you want to get done, like something visual for that person that wants to invest, and something visual for like if they have a contractor. I think that's the thing that has helped me the most, and the thing that I've learned the hard way, where it's like I have to have a plan, like phase one demo, phase two, tearing down walls, phase three insulation, phase four drywall, so on and so on, where it's like being ahead of the game, like what we were talking about, buying the appliances ahead of time. Right now, I'm buying flooring when we're not at flooring stage, but I want to be ahead of the game.
Yep.
Once we're done with painting, or even before we're done with painting, I want to make sure I have my cabinets lined up. Like
Yep.
I already have my bathroom vanities. Like I have things that are already coming in where it's like we're not ready for them, but I
Mhm.
want to make sure that I have them. Like my vanities, it's taken about a month for them to come in,
Mhm.
and they're barely like in, and I'm just like I'm so glad I ordered them like a month in advance, because
Yep.
now when we're ready to install them, I'll have them. So just like being prepared and ahead of the game, and having a checklist has really helped me.
Mhm.
But also knowing that you're not alone. I think that's the biggest lesson that I've learned. Because when I started this, I was, again, like, my family, they don't, like, we didn't know what real estate investing is. Like, nobody in my family had ever done it. Like, I just didn't have that support. It was more like, are you sure you want to do this? Like, are you sure this is going to make you money? You
Yeah.
know, it was a lot of questions versus support.
Mhm.
My husband and I ended up joining a mastermind called Rat Race to Five, and it has helped us so much because they're so encouraging. You know, we can go to these group of people. If we have questions, we can like really build a community from this, and we have, and especially through Instagram as well. Like, I've built a community where it's like now I have other investor friends, and I'm like, oh yay,
Yeah.
you know, let's meet up. Like, I'm in Oklahoma now, so I've been like hanging out with this other investor in Oklahoma, and he's been like super helpful. Like, whatever questions I have, like, I'm like, hey, you know, what have you done and when you've experienced this? And then he'll answer me, you know. That, like, having a support system, having a community, having a planned vision of what you want to do, I think those are the biggest things. Like,
Yeah.
they will save you so much headache.
Absolutely, I 100% agree. In the beginning of my investment journey, I would have different contractors go out and I'd be like, just itemize it, tell me what you think. And now I'm like, no, I don't need you to tell me what like
What
I
you
mean,
think?
here's the list, here's a video, like so I video all my projects now. Like before, I'm like, okay, here's the video of the entire thing, here's everything I noticed with the video. Here's the list. Same thing, week 1, I want you to do the subfloor. I want you to do this, blah, 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 blah. I remove what I
Yeah.
think the pricing is, but I have that on my own spreadsheet, what I think it'll be. And, yeah, it's a lot of planning, but you got to start planning. Yeah. like, um, yeah,
Yeah.
but that's changed everything because then I have like a list, and then of course I remove the pricing from it and I send that out to multiple contractors with the video. And then a lot of times contractors can give you bids just off a video now. So that's super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like,
Absolutely.
obviously always do a 10% cost overrun because they're always going to be wrong on their pricing. but yeah, super
They're
helpful.
not right. We're right and they're wrong.
All
Yeah.
right. So let's see. Oh yeah. Do you recommend any books or websites? Also give shout outs to your Instagram and anybody else you want to shout out to.
Yeah, of course. So the first book I actually like read that was real estate related was Rich Dad Poor Dad. But the book that really got me like thinking like, whoa, I gotta be really frugal with my money so that we can really go somewhere is Set for Life. So I
Scott
don't know
Trench,
if you've
right?
read that book. Sorry?
That's Scott Trench, I think, right?
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
Yeah, he's great.
So that book was really good because it just spoke to like my generation, you know, like to like, oh, yeah, I need to stop wasting money. I need to start thinking about what to invest in, you know. Rich Dad Poor Dad, I feel like started it, but then Set for Life, it's like, bam, that's what I'm gonna do. You know, I'm gonna do real estate investing. And that's when I became really invested with my husband. I mean, he had a lot to do with like getting me started, but you can't do something you don't want to do, right? So I could have just been like, no, you invest, like it's fine, you know, we'll do our thing separately. Because I had like a whole like life planned out for myself, but I was reading these books and then I'm like, oh, maybe I should get more invested. And
Yeah.
then that's when I was like, yeah, you know, move over. Let me take over this business. So I'm just like, I am the face of our company. No, I joke with him. But yeah, so then like now I have a lot more ownership of like the things that we need to do. And he still analyzes our properties. He started his own wholesaling like company, and he's trying to wholesale deals. He hasn't gotten one yet, but he hasn't given up. He started this like a month ago.
Yeah.
And so like I've just taken a lot more ownership of like the projects and the rehabs and the subcontractors and like you know, all of that stuff where it's like he's more like in the behind the scenes, and he's like finding our deals, and he's really good at that too, like looking at the numbers and things like that. And so we work really well. now. um, so yeah, no, it's been a fun ride, and I think those books definitely have helped me get to where I am now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, how do we find you?
Okay, so I am on Instagram. I have a TikTok too and a YouTube channel, but I'm not as super involved. But you can find those two things on my Instagram. It's Belen underscore the underscore builder, kind of like a play on words with Bob the Builder, because I
Mhm.
do a lot of the rehabs myself. So check me out there. I'm pretty active on there. I post a lot on my rehabs on a daily, as well as any tips or any lesson learned that I've came across.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate
Thank
it. And
you.
yeah, power to you. Glad you're in the biz, kicking ass. Yeah.
Trying.